Recently, I was on my PC organizing and cleaning up some files when I stumbled upon an old project. I watched it and it was one of my oldest 3D animations, and I think the first full 3D animations I uploaded to my Instagram. And it was super interesting to watch because immediately it came to my mind what I would do different now, and I could also see how far I've come in the past 4.5 years since making this. And that's where I got the idea for this video. So let's redo the scene with all the skills and all the things I've learned over the past few years. So first of all, let's watch the animation together, and then let's come up with a plan what we want to do and what we want to change and how we want to do it. So you can see in the animation we have this main object that has some kind of texture going on, and then this grid around it that is also animated, and this is floating above some kind of grass in the fog, and you can see the camera is going around it. For the new version, I want to move away from this VJ loop feel, and I want to create an epic cinematic realistic shot. But I also don't want to change it too much because I want to stay true to the original. So here's what we're gonna do. I want to keep the main object, like the sphere in the middle, as well as the grid around it. Of course I can enhance it or change it a bit, but I want to keep the basic principle of that. Then I also want to keep the ground with the grass and the fog. Of course I'm also going to redo it and make it better, but still I just want to have these 4 principles so it still looks kind of similar to the original, even though probably if I would do it now completely from scratch, or if I would do any 3D project now, I probably wouldn't add stuff like this. But still, I want to keep it in this because otherwise it would look too different from the original. So what I want to change is the camera. It should be more wide angle, and also it should be at one spot and then slightly moving in and not go around the main object. Then I also want to add in a lot more details, like some rocks on the side and so on. And I want it to look like some kind of crater, like a meteor impact or something, with this sphere grid in the middle. And I also maybe want to add some floating rocks so it looks a little bit mysterious and you're okay, what's going on there? So yeah, that's the rough plan, and with that in mind, let's start creating it. And let's open up the old project file. So first of all, let me get something out of the way. I did live commentary for this, but it took around 3 hours, which is way too long for the YouTube video. So that's why I'm doing a voiceover now and just summarizing everything. However, if you're interested in the full unedited version, I posted it for my YouTube members, so feel free to join for $6 a month and support the free tutorials and even get some exclusive videos. Let me first show you how it looks right now. So we have the camera going around the object, then we have this basic environment as well as some spotlights, and our main objects in the middle. Here is how it looks in render view, where I used Eevee by the way. So yeah, first of all, I switched to cycles, which is just better if you want to get realistic results. And I also changed a lot of the settings, which I also cover in my render settings video if you're interested in that. Then I deleted the Bezier curve and replaced the camera to a new spot a bit further away and set the focal length to 24. After that, I set up a simple animation with 2 keyframes and set the length to around 7 seconds with 24 FPS. Then I quickly deleted all the lights and started editing the mesh with proportional editing to get a better idea of how the crater could look. Then I redid the hair particle system I had for the grass in geometry nodes, because it's just faster and newer than the old way to do it with hairs. After that, I looked for a better grass assets with Blender Kit, because the old one was really low poly and looked like plastic. Once I found something interesting, I could just switch out the object of the geometry node system with the collection info node. The grass looked already way better. I also added an HDRI with the free plugin Easy HDRI that just helps you organizing your HDRIs. But I got the HDRI from Polyhaven. And an HDRI is something that I would always add, even if it's just on low strength and black and white, but it just gives you some extra realism, because the real world is also never completely gray or black. Next, I wanted to add some rocks to the back and the side of the crater, so I used Blender Kit again to load in some rock 3D models, mainly 3D scans. Here I just made sure that the rock type and the shape is roughly the same, but if they are a different color, that's not a big deal because we can adjust that later. After that, it was just some manual labor to scatter them around. Because there are photo scans, I had to watch out for the edges and make sure that we don't see them. Then I went into the shader editor, and with the hue saturation node I made sure that they all look similar and just turned down the saturation and adjusted the value depending on how dark they already were. And yeah, with that you can easily match different assets together. The next thing was to add some bigger models for the background that is further away. I found this photo scan of a mountainside, but it did not look good at first, but after duplicating and rotating it, it looked a lot better. The only problem was that they had some visible snow at the top. First I tried to cover it with individual rocks, but that took way too long and it was also adding unnecessary polygons. So in edit mode I just removed the vertices with the snow on it, which was okay because it's in the background and you can't really see it that well. Then I adjusted the camera animation again because I didn't like how it looked before and made it slightly move from the right to the left. Then I also added some rocks to the right and left in the foreground to get some more depth. The next step was to add the floating stones. For that I used Blender Kit again to import a few different stone variants, and then with the randomized transform feature moved and duplicated them around. To animate them, I selected all the stones and moved them down a bit and keyframed their rotation and location. Then I moved to the loss frame and applied another random transform to randomize the position and rotation and move them up and keyframed them again. So now I had the stones moving up with different variation in speed and rotation. Also, if I didn't like a stone or wanted to move it somewhere else, I could just delete it or move it with the delta transform. To make it more realistic, I also scattered some stones on the ground by duplicating my geometry node system and adding the stone collection to it. Next I focused on the main object. This was a bit more difficult because it was just a lot of try and error until something worked and looked good, because I couldn't change it too much. What I ended up doing was adding some actual displacement to the sphere, as well as playing around with combining different textures to get something that looks a bit less basic. For the grid around it, I also played around with the subdivisions and the displacement, but the biggest change was adding some transparency, which gave me this cool effect. Then I also added in a point light inside the sphere because the emission of the objects was not enough to light the environment. To get the light through the sphere, I just had to increase the radius of the point light. At this moment I already spent around 2 hours and I did most of the work, but I did not like it at all. This was a really frustrating moment, but sometimes just a few small changes can go a long way. I remember that I haven't added any volumetrics yet, so I added a big cube and gave it a principal volume material with a really low density. Then I also imported some animated smoke VDBs. But the animation was a bit too fast and hectic, so I ended up freezing it and just taking one frame out of it so it does not move. After that I also turned the grass darker and less saturated like it is in the original, because the green did not look good with the violet. I also added the ground fog of the original, which I nearly forgot, and I tweaked it a bit by adding a gradient to it so there is more at the bottom and then it fades into less and less. Now I did a few test renders and changed a few minor things, like making the HDRI darker as well as moving some floating rocks around. And then I rendered the first version. It was already fine, but because I rendered on another device, the cloud VDB files were missing, so I had to copy them over and render again with a few minor changes, and then I was satisfied with it. So now let's get to the last step, post-processing. I open it up in After Effects and here you can see the difference between the old version, the version 1 and the version 2 of the new render. First I did some color grading, nothing special, just adding some contrast and a slight vignette to bring the focus more into the middle. Then I added another adjustment layer and added some more effects like some lens distortion, chromatic aberration and some grain to just get some additional realism and make it look like it's filmed with macro camera. Next I added some lens stirred overlays with 2 different textures. Then I also added some glow with the Deep Glow plugin. I also could have used the Fog Glow glare node in the Blender Compositor, but honestly I just forgot it, and yeah, that's why I used this Deep Glow plugin, which gives me pretty nice glow. In the end I played a bit around with the Optical Flares plugin from Video Copilot to add some lens flares, but it felt a bit too much, so I only put it on really low brightness. I think post-processing is a really important step and something I haven't done over 4 years ago, and I could learn a ton in this area. If you want to learn this as well, I just recently launched an After Effects beginner compositing course where you can learn all of these and a lot more, like the basics of After Effects, multi-layer compositing, lens flare, lens effects, lens stirred, and also more advanced effects in depth for only $24. So if you're interested and if you want to see exactly what you will learn in this course and more details about it, make sure to check out the link below. And that was it. So I think we've upgraded pretty well. Of course, the first one was a different style and looked more like some kind of VJ loop, and ours is like way more cinematic. But I think that also really like accurately represents the stuff I learned over the past few years, and that's also like part of the learning journey, is like how your style changes. And yeah, I think you can see it pretty well in this example. To finish, here's a quick summary of the most important things I've learned over the past years that I could apply to this experiment. First of all, the camera movement, and here sometimes less is more. I know like 360 around the object can be pretty cool sometimes, but the way we did it now, a little bit less movement is just more grounded in reality and sometimes can look cooler. Then the second thing is better assets. Like even just using Blender Kit could improve the scene a lot with the rocks and the grass and everything. And yeah, higher quality assets in your scene will always improve the scene overall. Then the third thing was just making the scenes bigger and more detailed. As a beginner, it can feel really overwhelming, and I think that's also something you learn the more projects you do, is to just trust in the process and make the scene a bit bigger. And at some point in this experiment, I felt like, okay, this looks so bad. And yeah, if you're not satisfied yet, sometimes it just needs some small changes and it looks a lot different. Then the fourth point is just some more techniques I've learned, and I could apply this to the grid, for example, and to the sphere, like as displacement and stuff, be more bold, experimenting with some textures. And yeah, I think that also helped a lot in this experiment. And then the fifth thing is adding all the volumetrics, adding some more depth into the scene. It just gives it like a different feel and looks more interesting. And then the sixth thing, of course, was the post-processing. I think that went a long way. It's always super interesting for me to do these videos and see what I've learned, but also share it with you guys. Like this video if you liked it, and dislike it if you don't, and also let me know in the comments what do you think about this, or if you have any questions at all. Feel free to also leave some YouTube video suggestions in the comments, because I want to do more regular YouTube videos, not like last year. And yeah, also join my Discord if you want to have a community and like regularly 3D challenges or feedback on your art or whatever. Link is also in the description. And yeah, with that, I wish you all a great week. Bye bye.